What are some of the long-term consequences of the oil spill going to be?
Uh, the economy of the Gulf region, we're already seeing it being devastated. We are going to see continued ecological damage. I predicted this the day of the spill when BP was saying it won't even, the oil won't even reach the coast. I mean, that was nonsense. I mean, how could you even predict such a thing or make such a claim? We're going to see human health consequences of this from people, having long-term exposure to the water, to sea life, to flora and fauna. We're going to see psychological dimensions and impacts of this spill in the Gulf, and I think more broadly speaking throughout the country. We're also going to see then the continued impoverishment of communities that have been suffering prior to this, even prior to Hurricane Katrina. As much as we want to paint, the Gulf region as this beautiful, this prosperous and thriving region, there's always been extraordinarily massive poverty in the region, and people really dependent on petrochemical industries throughout what people have called the chemical corridor. Many activists call it Cancer Alley, from Baton Rouge to Mobile and beyond in Louisiana, but also dependent, of course, upon sea life and the fishing industry. But so those are the impacts that we're definitely going to see. What I hope to see in terms of impacts, this is the second way I would answer that question, is again a rethinking of the very idea of progress, a rethinking of some of the foundational industries that are at the core of our economy, at the core of our society, at the core of our culture, and a need to shift away from those industries and to really think deeply about how we would do that, not just shutting down this company or that company, but thinking about what some scholars and activists have called a just transition. And this comes out of environmental justice studies and theory, and that is, if we are going to phase out a particular industry, if we're going to phase out a particular way of life, then let's do it in a just and a sustainable and in a humane way. Let's find ways to employ people in these unsustainable industries. Let's not point the finger at particular industries and say, you guys are the bad guys. Let's point the finger at all of us and say, we need to rethink this thing from the bottom up. So those are the kinds of impacts that I hope will result, and that we will have a green, sustainable, and socially just future.
Do you think the oil spill will be a catalyst for environmental change and perhaps new attitude on the part of consumers about consuming fossil fuels and being more energy efficient?
Yes, I do. I certainly hope so. I certainly hope we see a real sea change in public opinion, public attitudes, and the attitudes of companies and the government in terms of regulation. What I worry about, though, is sort of the broader picture. I mean, if we connect the BP disaster to broader energy policies, and if we connect it to the problem of climate change or climate disruption, as some NASA scientists have called this phenomenon, then I think we're going to see, unfortunately, more resistance from government and corporations. And we've seen this with resistance to the Kyoto Protocol on climate change. We've seen this last December with the resistance at the Conference of the Parties 15 in Copenhagen, the big global gathering of leaders trying to address the problem of climate change. And you would think, I certainly would think, that given the evidence all around us, scientific, anecdotal, and otherwise, and everything in between, that our leaders would take serious, concerted, and even strong and even drastic measures to reverse the tide of climate change. And they didn't. They didn't. And no one is expecting them to do anything more than that at the upcoming Conference of Parties 16 meeting in Cancun this fall. So this as a sociologist suggests to me that social inequality, that entrenched interests, and that power and the differentials in power, and who has the ability to define a situation, who has the ability to make policy or prevent policy, these things matter most. And so even if there's a sea change in public opinion, it's not clear that the government or industry will listen and follow on these broader issues. And so I think we're going to have to see some serious and dramatic change on all fronts. This above all, I think more than any environmental issue that I've studied or been aware of, this is not a time for reform, for tweaking the system. I think business as usual, whether it's our thinking about problems and solutions and lobbying Congress and industry, those things are going to have to be dramatically rethought, I think, again, from the bottom up. Otherwise, we're going to have to make serious changes in terms of adapting to the reality of climate change.
David Pellow, professor of sociology at the University of Minnesota, thanks for joining us on Access Minnesota.
Thank you very much.
That's all for this edition of Access Minnesota. Coming up next month, a look at the potential environmental dangers facing Minnesota and how the state is prepared to handle them. Thanks for watching.
Access Minnesota. Issues that matter to you. Join us again next week as we bring you the newsmakers and stories that shape our everyday lives. Access Minnesota is produced by the Minnesota Broadcasters Association in cooperation with the University of Minnesota's College of Liberal Arts.